Hey everyone, Brandon here from SnowmodRC. So you bought yourself a new scaler. Should you customize it? If so, how? So, we're here at the bench. You got yourself a new crawler. Congratulations, welcome to the hobby. You've been bit by the bug. There's no going back now. Immediately after hitting the trail with your buddies and stuff, you decide you want to upgrade your crawler, make it look cool, make it your own, which is one of the greatest parts about this hobby. You see so much innovation and thought goes into these builds, whether it be by hand or having somebody design something for them or whatever, but there's a piece of all of us in each of our builds. So behind me you have the stock Axial SCX-10-2 deadbolt, and then you have also an Axial SCX-10 deadbolt. Now this is a Gen 1 deadbolt, that is a Gen 2, but they were both a deadbolt at some point in RTR. Now that looks stock minus its wheels and tires, obviously, and this, believe it or not, is also stock. The only thing that's not stock anymore is the servo and the links. Everything else is stock Axial platform. I have not changed anything else, so this is all built on the same platform basically, minus the axles. That's the only difference you'll see here. So that being said, let's start off with knockoff parts. Okay, so first thing to think about is knockoff parts. All right, at what point are you dealing with knockoff parts, and at what point are you dealing with rebranded parts? Because they are two completely different things. So you need to watch out for that. A lot of companies, for Hobbywing, for example, or Castles, they have ESCs that are rebranded to other companies. The other companies pay to have their logo put on it, but essentially it's a Castle ESC or a Hobbywing ESC. So that is not the same as a knockoff part. Okay, so what you're looking at is knockoff parts is just some guy that stole somebody else's design completely, inch for inch, millimeter for millimeter, where you want to call it, and decided to sell that part. That is a knockoff part. To say, for lack of a better term, China-made parts is not really a thing anymore, because all these crawlers and such, well, not all of them, the majority of them, their pieces are made overseas. They have the warehouses, they have the factories, they have the manpower, and they have the discipline to work hard to get this stuff built for us. So everything is China made. When you hear everything's made in China, well, it's basically Asia, but everything is Asia made, and that's how it is. So those are just two things to look out for, the difference between knockoffs and rebranded. So keep an eye out for that. The next thing to think about is the parts themselves. So you start getting into the gears and the servos and the electronics, which is all great and priceless to do, especially for the kids these days, to get them start wrenching on something small, more obtainable, a little bit easier for them to grasp concepts and such of how gears work, and power and torque and gear the changing the gear ratios, shock oil, grease. There's a lot of priceless knowledge that can be had by working on these, and not to mention, a lot of people don't realize it, but the RC hobby inspires a lot of technology. All the robotics and stuff you see, all that stuff starts with a guy probably doing this very same thing. Started with an RC car of some kind to get him into what he's doing, and so we're constantly inspiring the world. So with that, amongst working on your cars, what you will realize is not all parts are tested and tuned. There's a lot of companies out there that just take a part, they throw their own spin on it, or almost copy it blatantly like a knockoff part, and throw it out there. It hasn't been tested, it hasn't been tuned, it hasn't been proven, and at that point what you're running into is parts not meshing. And if parts don't mesh, the car's not going to perform how you want it to. So when you're getting your parts, you don't want to just throw a bunch of parts at it. Not to mention, the one thing to always remember is these cars are engineered to run as is for the price. Okay? So if you start changing a bunch of things, you are changing what this car was engineered to do from the factory. Most of these are designed extremely well. You know, like the Axial SCX10 platform or 10.2 platform have been around forever. Almost everybody who crawls has at least one. And RTR kit, they are engineered to be great trucks for their price, and you can have fun with that. And they work very well. You know, plastic, metal, whatever aside, you know, for their price point and stuff, as I said, they work well. So you need to think about how the parts are designed. Were they tested? Were they tuned? Do you see people using them? Do your research. Read reviews. Go on the forums. Go on Facebook. Go on Instagram. Ask questions. The hobby is a massive place with so much knowledge, and yes, you are going to get a lot of answers and opinions, but between all of those, you should be able to come up with an educated purchase. And that's another thing too, is make educated purchases. Don't buy the next hot thing you see just because it looks cool. You know, those purchases usually end up coming to rip-off parts and so on and so forth, perpetually killing the hobby, so to speak. So, you know, bad purchases can lead to other things, and it's just, you know, just be smart about it. You know, take the time to find what parts you've heard work well together. You know, if you have SSD transmission gears and you want to run a hot racing spur, is that going to affect anything? You know, whereas they are the same gear pitch and stuff, but, you know, did one design the teeth a little bit differently? Did one maybe heavier than the other? Is it going to put too much stress? You know, there's all these little things to consider. Just going out and basically throwing money at your crawler all willy-nilly is senseless, because for the price of these cars, you can have a lot of fun designed as they are. Yes, there are a few things where you probably immediately want to go replace those things. Almost every crawler has one or two of those things. But those things are probably something you can find a very smart purchase for immediately. You can find, like, servos. The most replaced thing in a crawler is probably the servo. Especially if it's an RCR, it's probably the first thing you're going to break. So servo purchases are almost a no-brainer. You hop into a Facebook group, you say, hey, this is what I have. Somebody will toss you some good servos in a price range. You buy what's good for you, you throw it in, you're good to go. You know, but there's also, on the electrical note, let's talk about specs, okay? A lot of people don't realize your crawler is as good, or your voltage system and how everything in your electronics works together is based off basically your weakest link, okay? So I got stuff on the board, but that's alright. So hopefully you guys can, let me make sure. Alright, so hopefully you guys can see this okay. We'll take these out of the way. So basically you have, you have your ESC, right? You have your servo, and you have your receiver, right? So we'll do here, so here's the battery, alright? And this is just something to consider when you're buying your stuff, because if you just buy a bunch of electronics people to tell you to buy, then you might end up with not what you want, or a fire. So, and for anybody taking notes, letting out all the magic smoke out of your RC car is not a good thing. So let's say, we'll do 2S, all right, for the sake of this. So that's 7.4 volts. So your 7.4 volts goes to the ESC, right? And so let's just say you have your internal BEC on your speed control, because this has a set voltage regulator inside it which goes to the receiver. So we'll just do this real quick just so you can see how everything goes. And then, so let's say the ESC is, we'll start with the axial AE5, so that's 5 volts, right? So this puts out 5 volts to the receiver, okay? So now the receiver is 5 volts. This servo, for whatever reason, runs best at 7.4 volts. But this servo is only getting the 5 volts from the receiver. So it's actually less in power. The servo will not be as strong as recommended on the box. That's why there's servo specs for different voltages. Alright, so that was a simple example. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to change a couple numbers just so you guys get what I'm saying about buying electronics. So now we're going to do, let's say the receiver is capable of 7.4, alright? So the receiver is capable of 7.4 volts. The servo is capable of 7.4 volts, but your ESC is 5. So again, not only is the servo being shortchanged, but the receiver is also. You can see the trickle effect. So your electronics are only as good as your weakest link. So remember that when you're buying your stuff. Check your servo, your specs, get those voltage numbers and all that, you know, in tune. So hopefully you guys found this useful. I didn't mean to ramble on, but you know, it is okay to leave a rig stock, and that's what I just want people to remember. You will see even guys like me who have completely built rigs either keeping them stock and just visually upgrading them, or only changing the minimal things like the Smurf J behind me. I've only changed the servo and the links, and some steel gears just because it's heavy, you know. So, but either then, it's not aftermarket stuff really. It's still the axial platform. It's still the axial transmission. It's still the axial gear type. You know, so that's all things you need to consider when you go to customize your truck. Should you customize it? Absolutely. Make it your own. Like I said in the beginning, that is one of the greatest things about this hobby. There's so much innovation and passion and creation done every single day, and you can see it from all over the world. It's a huge, massive community. So go out there, customize your truck, but just be smart about it. That's all. Have a good one, everybody.